Hello there, welcome to another hobby. I'm Austin. Today's hobby is more Inktober. Let's see what we get. Kicking the Creative and Gristober. So we got Hidden, Split, and Lo-Fi. So I just tried looking up the definition of lo-fi because I only know of it from audio stuff, and I can't find anything indicating it has any sort of visual component, so best I can figure is it might be referring to those lo-fi hip-hop YouTube videos where it's just an anime person sitting at a desk working on like notes. That's the closest thing I could think of to any sort of visual representation of lo-fi, so I guess I might just use that. I think given these three prompts, I might switch it up a bit today and do traditional art instead. Do some good old pencil and ink on paper. So I'm gonna get that set up and I'll be back with you in a moment. Okay, so for this one I was thinking of using that lo-fi hip-hop girl as kind of a basis for the layout of what I'm going to do. And I think what I'm going to do is use the hidden and the split as like there's a hidden alien inside this lo-fi girl and she's splitting open to reveal it. I don't know how well it's going to work out, but let's try it and find out, I guess. Got a picture of that lo-fi girl from the YouTube video up on my desktop monitor right now. I'm using as reference. I don't know if I'm gonna bother with all of the extra details because the whole scene on these lo-fi hip-hop videos is pretty complex actually. There's a lot going on. The character themselves is pretty, plain anime style, but the background, also I guess like anime, has a lot more detail to it because it's static. And I don't think I'm gonna put in all of that effort today because that would take a long time. Okay, so if we have this lo-fi girl kind of sitting center frame, normally she's got her chin on her hand, but if I'm having her split to in the center, I'm gonna have to move that other arm. So we'll just put it also down on the table. I guess this will be an alien head, which means it should probably be smaller so it can seem like it actually fit inside. Not sure what kind of alien I could do. I guess I could just do like the classic gray kind of alien. I don't know how much like I want this to be horror like and gross, and how much I want it to be maintain the sort of cozy whimsy of the original lo-fi style, but we'll play around with it and see what we get. Because it could have like, ooze and gore and like sinew and stuff stretching between these two halves that are separating if I wanted to make it creepy. Or I can just make it like smooth and like it's a suit made out of silicone or something. Now, should the headphones be on the head that's splitting open, or on the alien head, even though that kind of doesn't make any sense? It's probably funnier if it's just on the alien's head. Keep it listening to that lo-fi music. It's just took off its disguise because it was getting warm. Now her expression in the original is almost like bored looking, so I think I'm gonna keep that going with this alien. Have its eyes lidded like it's also still bored. There's this trick that anime usually does where when a character is like mind controlled or their mind has gone blank or something, they'll have like gray eyes, sort of. They won't have any shine to their iris, and it'll just be like flat, kind of dull look. So I think I'll do that with those eyes if I can. Although with just ink and no color, it might be a little bit difficult, but we'll try. The more I work on this, the more I'm thinking that I'm probably going to keep the style fairly whimsical and PG, I guess. Seems to fit this kind of semi-humorous image better anyway. Might still be able to put the alien's hand here, so it's still, leaning on chin on palm, but I might have placed it a little too far from the table for it to seem comfortable. I'll try adding it in and see what it looks like. Maybe if the alien has like slightly long arms, it's like they pulled their arm out of this suit and left the other one on the table, maybe. Yeah, I think I drew the head too high up for it to be resting on this arm in a comfortable looking way like the original. And I don't feel like redrawing the head. I kind of like what I've got with it. And it would also, if I had it leaning down more, it would start to cover up that other half of the girl's head in the background, which I don't want to do. So I'm just going to leave it. So this lamp, for example, has like a little stuffed animal strapped to the bar at the top here. And it's got like another one on this side and a jar of paintbrushes or something behind it. And then there's like another jar with other paintbrushes and a potted plant, and there's like a bunch of pictures on the wall and a shelf. I think I'm just gonna like skip all of that and kind of just put in the basic biggest pieces to kind of make it read like the original scene without having to add in all these details. I'm gonna put in that cat, but I didn't give myself a whole lot of space here with the side of the body splitting out over top of where the cat normally is in the original image. So I'm gonna move this picture over, move that over here. In case you're wondering, I'm just using like a regular mechanical pencil I got from Staples, I think. It's this Stadler Riptide. Nothing special or fancy about it. I like the feel of it. I used to have a really nice metal mechanical pencil, but the part that held the eraser was still plastic and a piece broke off of it, so it doesn't hold the eraser anymore. And I use an eraser a lot, so it kind of became not usable for me, so I don't use it anymore. But I couldn't find it online. I guess they stopped making it. I couldn't find a replacement for it, so I just started using these regular ones. I'm also probably not going to do this whole cityscape in the background very detailed like they have it in the original image. I'm looking at the nighttime version, but I might use the daytime one as a reference for this city so that I don't have to try and color in the whole background with ink, make it look really dark. That'll draw a lot of attention. Like it'll draw the eye if it's pure black back here and nothing else is, it'll just draw the eye towards that where all the contrast is. Yeah, so this city, even in the daytime one, is really busy. It's like kind of looking at a hillside going up, so there's like layers and layers of buildings. But I think I'm just going to like do the really lazy silhouette of a skyline and try to keep it just simple so that hopefully it doesn't draw the eye too much. Because without color, it's a little bit harder to make it not stand out in the background. Because in the original, it's just really low saturation and almost no line work, but I can't really do either of those things with just ink. I can do thin lines, and that's what I am going to do with outlining this silhouette, but I can't really have no line work with just ink, or at least not in a easy way that I'm comfortable with. Normally there's like a plant covering up part of that cat too. Not gonna bother with that. There's all kinds of books and stuff on the table I'm not going to bother with. I'm just putting some pieces of paper. There's a couple pieces of paper in the original, but they've got like writing and stuff on them that I'm not going to bother putting. So I think that's probably pretty good as far as the general layout for this. Now the question is, do I jump straight into inks or do I refine this with pencil first to make sure I've got it where I want it? I think I'll refine some of it and split the difference. Refine the important parts like the character. Problem you run into when you do eyes like these aliens have, where they're all just one solid color, when you do them in this inking style, if you put a shine in the eye like I did here, it'll often read as their pupil, as the direction they're looking. So I could put the shine on the bottom to make it look like it's looking down. That, even though it doesn't really make any sense, it might help. And then if I add a couple smaller shines around the outside, it might make the whole eye look like it's shinier without it making it look like it's looking off into the distance somewhere, not at what it's doing on the table. I think that's probably enough to move on to the inking. I think to start, I'm going to work on something that's not super important, just to kind of get into the flow of inking again. If you're wondering, I'm using these Pigma Microns. I bought a pack that's got a bunch of different sizes. And then I also have some of these Staedtler ones that are basically the same thing. I kind of use them interchangeably. Oh, I forgot to mention too, I'm just using regular printer paper. Nothing special there. I'm doing thinner, almost invisible lines around the light bulb part, because it gives the sense of it being brighter because there's not, dark lines around it. And I don't know if you notice here, if you can even see the pencil lines, but I ended up correcting quite a bit because of moving this vertical bar in a little bit compared to where I had my pencil lines. So this wheel part on the back of this lamp, I moved it in quite a ways from where I had my pencil lines. It's always good to be willing to just change where your pencil lines are. This keyboard is a good example of something that is actually pretty terrible. I messed it up pretty bad with this bottom row of keys like being super skewed. Also, that's not at all what a keyboard button layout looks like, but I don't think many people are gonna notice, honestly. I think for the character, I'm gonna switch down from my 2 to my 1, because I can make thicker lines with this still fairly easily, but it'll allow me to do a little bit more variation in the thinner parts if I want to. Hate drawing these smooth, mechanical, curved edges on these types of things. It's always hard to keep it looking proper. You see I like screwed up this one curve there, ended up going over it twice, thickening the line where I don't want it to be thick, but hopefully small stuff like that won't stand out too much. I think here's where I want to switch to a fairly thick line for the major outlines of the character. So I'm gonna go with this 0.5. It's fairly thick. I'm gonna start with the sleeve just to see if it's too thick. Actually, start smaller, work my way up. I'll be smart about this instead. Let's go with the 0.3 instead. Yeah, I think I'm glad I did that because this looks pretty thick. Might increase it a bit more for the main outline of the character and some of the bigger props, but for this stage, this is just right, I think. Like I said, I'm adding more detail to the character than is in the style of the original drawing for the lo-fi girl, and that's because the original is animated, so they don't put a lot of detail into the animated bits. But because my drawing is not animated, I kind of want the style to be a bit more cohesive, so I'm keeping everything. I guess I'm sort of meeting in the middle, because I'm not going as detailed as the background is, where the background on the video is, it's painted, it doesn't even have line work, and then I'm going more detailed than the animated characters that are just fairly solid shapes with simple outlines. I'm adding some pieces of paper back here just to make it clear that this is still part of the desk, because this section up here kind of blended into the background a little bit too much, and it was hard to tell what was what. Alright, switching to the 005 really fine line for all these little details. If you want to get into this kind of art, ink pens like this, you don't really need a whole set of a bunch of different sizes. Really, if you just start with a small one, you can still do thick lines, you just have to go over them a couple of times. But for the longest time I just had this 005 and a 1. And pretty soon after I think I got an 05, which is like quite thick. But that was all I needed for quite a while to get pretty much everything I wanted out of them. Having the multiple sizes is nice, but I honestly don't even really use them all that much. This drawing is the very first time I've used a 2 or a 3, first time I pulled them out of the package. Normally I just stick with the 005 and the 01 and use the 05 a little bit for really thick lines. This eye, for example, if I noticed it, I probably would have done it with the 01, but now I'm too lazy to switch back over, so I'm just going over the lines a couple of times with this 005 and darkening them that way. I could color these spots on this cow in fully black, but I feel like that would draw the eye too much because there'd be a lot of contrast over there. In a picture like this that's mostly white, there's a large black spot that's really going to draw your eye in, so I'm trying to avoid it on places where I don't want the focus to be. And apologies if holding my hand like this completely blocks what I'm doing, but it's the only way I can get some of these horizontal lines where I want them easily. Now, this is where I'm going to differ from the anime style a bit by adding these like hatch lines for shading. I guess that ends up being a little bit more manga style rather than anime. It's hard to do these large sections like this. Keep it consistent without going over the lines, but just make it a little bit less dense so I don't have to be as consistent with as many lines. You can see I'm kind of going over the edge of this chair here. I'll show you something you can do to kind of repair that a bit even though you're working in ink. There's some workarounds. Adding these hatch lines at the edges of objects where they're touching each other can really make it feel like the object is actually in contact rather than floating above. I guess that's it's ambient occlusion. Now, I was considering doing hatching on this whole skyline part to separate the buildings from the sky, but I think that might end up making it a bit too busy and confusing looking. Plus it's a large area, so any mistakes I make like I did over here will really stand out right center frame. So I think I'm just going to avoid it. For these larger shapes over here, I'm going to use a slightly thicker pen for these hatched line shadows. And then to fix these crossed lines where I didn't stay within the shape like I was talking about, all you need to do is make your line a little thicker. And since I was already planning on thickening some of these lines anyway, this works out fine. Gets most of it, except for the really egregious ones where I went way over. Doing these thick lines only around the very borders of the objects and not at all within the shape of the object itself also helps differentiate between objects so that the brain can really separate the two and say, oh, this is chair, this is body. Whereas before I added that thick line in there, it all kind of melded together a little bit and was potentially confusing. I'm going to try and use this fairly sparingly because it is really like a bold line. Changes the style quite a bit if I use it on everything. So I'm mainly using it to just separate some objects that are a little bit unclear where the separation is. And also I want to avoid using it in anything that starts to go towards the background, because it'll, if I keep the thickest lines closer to the foreground, it'll give it a feeling of depth. Another trick you can do is do the thick lines on the sides of objects that would be away from the light to give it a sense of directionality of the light where the shadow is. I'm not really doing that with this one, but you could. Like, for example, if I just were to put a dark line only on the bottom of this arm and not the top, then it'll make it seem like the light is shining on the top of it. But like I said, I want to use this thick line sparingly, so mainly just these big shapes that have a lot of empty space and a bit of confusing line work between them. Like, I'm gonna add one to kind of separate the scarf from the shirt. Hopefully that helps. Now is the scary bit where I have to decide if I want to make this eye all black. Of the shapes in this that I could make all black, it's the best one because it'll draw your eye the most, and I want you to look at this alien's face. But it will be quite a big contrast from the rest of the image. So if I do that, I might also end up doing this foam piece on the earmuffs. I don't know. There's only one way to find out if it works, and that's just to do it, I guess. I think I like it. There's a few more things that I need to kind of shade in with this fine line, and I think then I could call it done. I know these shadows don't make any sense given the light source, but that's fine. They're over there. Nobody's gonna look. Do this. Instead of doing it solid black, let's just do it dark with lines. Trying to be a little bit more careful with this one because it is centerpiece to this image. You're going to be looking right at it, ideally. Well, almost right at it. You're going to be looking at the alien's face, ideally, but this is going to be right there within that field of view. And I think because the girl has dark hair, I might have to color that in too, at the risk of it being really ugly over here with this really large shape having these hatch lines in it. But we'll do what we can to make it look clean. It's much easier to do these on small areas like this. Trying to keep these lines straight, you have to go quick, but going quick means you go over edges. Try and fix that up with that same trick a little bit once I'm done here. Of all the parts of this that require actual skill and not just patience, I guess, it's this. This takes a lot of practice, and even still, you constantly screw it up because it takes a lot of control to get it just right. That's about as good as I can hope for given my skill level. Let's just thicken up some of those spots where I went over a little bit. Try to hide some of those crimes, as Adam Savage likes to say. And that's that. Thanks for watching me explore another hobby, and have a good one.